Global Connect. This is the first track, so welcome to TiEcon 2023. Welcome, and hope you all have a wonderful 3 days here with this conference. I want to start by welcoming the Canadian panel on stage, and I'll do a quick introduction. Consul General Rana Sarkar, Chris Albinson. Consul General Rana Sarkar was appointed the Consul General of Canada in San Francisco, Silicon Valley in 2017 with accreditation for Northern California and Hawaii. A few interesting things I found out about him was that he spent some time studying in England, did some studies spent some time in India. He was a CEO of a Canadian Indian Business Council, was an entrepreneur, and truly a wandering Indian in many sense of the word. You know, most Indians, they're all over the different parts of the world. So here is a person, again, Canadian of Indian descent, lived and participated in different parts of the world. Chris Albinson, he's a seasoned tech investor and a longtime champion for Canadian innovators in Silicon Valley. He's the CEO of Communitech. In Canadian circles, Albinson is best known for his role as a co-founder of C100, a nonprofit organization that supports Canadian technology, entrepreneurship, and investment. Welcome to Gateway to Canada and the world. Thanks.
Thank you very much, George, and thank you to all of you who've made the time. I know that it's logistics were challenging, but you know, the principle of jugad sort of applies in this instance, and you know, we carry on, and as India does, so does Canada. We carry on, and what I will say, and I'll just preface the beginning of this session by saying a couple of things about TiE. I'll also say a little bit more about my great colleague here, Chris Albinson, and put a bit of a frame around some of the conversation that we're having in Canada and why I think it's important for all of you in your organizations, wherever you're sitting, to be thinking about Canada right now. And I know many of you, you know, this is some new topic areas that are coming up regarding Canada, but for others, it's something that you're very familiar with. And even those who are familiar with Canada and have spent time there, what I would say is that there is something very special happening right now, and there's a special moment that's forming that makes Canada even more important for the plans, not just of individuals who are looking to find their way in the world and you know, in the midst of significant challenge right now, just given global mobility patterns, but people who are really looking for that next phase of opportunity if they're at various inflection points in their lives and also their careers. And this is a moment of talent. I think that, you know, this is probably an underwritten theme in terms of this, the rest of this conference, is that this future that we are all boldly writing is going to be written by catalytic talent. And so that is a significant theme for Canada. And so let me just say a couple of things about TiE. First of all, it's always a pleasure to be back. Chris and I did a session in TiE the virtual year when we were all on screens, and there we had an opportunity to really share some of the ideas that we were seeing in the midst of pandemic that were making Canada extremely exciting. And what I would say is that this is the sort of second part to that. And because I think that even in the interim years, and it hasn't been many, it's only been 2, but so much has already happened in the world that has changed the landscape. And I'll put this in a context as well that you know, much of what you'll also be hearing throughout the few days here at this conference is going to be you know, the moment of TiE and the network, the global network that TiE has put together is really meeting a global moment of inflection right now. And that moment is something that we see reflected in the geopolitical realities of the world that are shifting, very fast and probably more significantly than we have seen in our lifetimes. The geoeconomic reality, the economics and supply chains and the reshoring, nearshoring, friendshoring, that is a significant theme that we're starting to see. But we're also seeing other themes of real talent flows that sort of go beyond what the headline number is. This is still the moment, as my good friend Parag Khanna says in his great book, Move, this is still the moment of movement. And talent is the great lubricant for all of these things. What I'll say about Canada, and Chris, I really want to bring Chris into the conversation, is Canada is at a moment of significant growth. And that's an understatement. Since the beginning of 2022, we have brought in 1 million new Canadians. And take that number in, it's 1 million new Canadians. And what that means is that's 2.7% of the population. So close to 40, we're at 40 million in terms of population. For a G7 country in this geopolitical moment, that is an extraordinary thing to be happening. And why is it that we have the ability to do that? Why is it that we have the social license to do that? And it's because our immigration process is something which is beyond sort of political divide. It's something where we have cross-party consensus on the need to grow. We have a points-based immigration system that many of you are familiar with. We also have policy that has been working in this direction, not just for the last 5 years where we've really accelerated it, but is also underwritten by the previous 40 years of policy. And as a result of that, we have a moment where Canada is becoming the #1 destination, not just for international students, which it is, surpassing Australia, surpassing Great Britain, and even, in many instances, the United States as the preferred destination for international students. And so there's a real moment for students. But in terms of where global aspiration is going, people are looking at Canada as a stable, a predictable, but also dynamic environment that is inclusive, that shares the values. Like my colleague in Los Angeles is Zaib Sheikh, and we are two sort of diasporatic Canadians who represent Canada here. We are a diverse polity in Canada. We have a series of pretty much every aspect of our social and political life is diverse by design. And as our Prime Minister is fond of saying, that didn't happen by accident, won't continue without effort, but it's a significant global achievement. And it's something that, in the context of everything else that's going wrong in the world, or that we hear, all the ructions that we hear, this is a story that all of you should be engaged with. Because if we think about, and we're going to speak about this, we're going to talk about the H-1B candidates that are having a difficult time. I just heard right now there were 780,000 applicants to the H-1B pool, of which 85,000 were admitted. And these are, those who didn't get admitted, they should be coming to Canada. And we are looking forward to putting pathways forward to ensure that everyone who is qualified, that is able to, demonstrate those credentials, we can show them a pathway towards Canada. And that's our objective, because we recognize that growth in Canada is going to come from the growth in our talent. So that's the fundamental message that I wanted to send. I also wanted to send the message that the Canadian tech ecosystem is above critical mass. We've reached escape velocity, and Chris is a great exemplar of that activity. So let me just say a thing or two about Chris. I think we heard that he was the founder of C100, which he'll talk about, was founded as an organization that was modeled after TiE, but involving Canadians. He's been a dynamic innovator in pretty much everything that he's ever done, starting from his work in Canada with the tech ecosystem there, but shortly thereafter coming to the United States after some exits to become not just a founder but also a significant investor, but a real community builder. But recently Chris has come back to Canada to lead a really interesting organization called Communitech, which is based in the Waterloo corridor, that does many different things, including works with the ecosystem to the tech ecosystem, but also sort of the broader ecosystem to build community in Kitchener-Waterloo. And so it's that fusion between building of the tech ecosystem, the investment landscape, the entire ecosystem of support around it, and the policy coordination, which is a real special sauce we have in Canada. And we have people like Chris and Chris himself coming back and building this ecosystem with us. So what I really want to do for the next few minutes is maybe open a conversation, and maybe I can invite Chris up, or maybe we can just grab mics over there and have a quick conversation with Chris about his experiences coming back. He's you'll hear from his commentary what he has been up to, and I look forward to this conversation. So Chris, I wonder if you could say a few things of words of welcome to this audience, and then we can start getting into it.
I do want to directly thank TiE. So in 2002, I was kindly invited to go to India with TiE, Vish Mitra, who was chair of TiE at the time, met the CEOs of Wipro, Tata, Infosys, Reliance, met Modi when he was chief minister. I still have a copy of the India 2020 plan on my desk. Just amazing amount of innovation and growth, and an amazing community. And one of the things that was indelible for me coming out of that community was we want to make the movement of people, ideas, and capital seamless, no friction. And we took that to heart when we started C100 and the Canadian mission in 2008, and basically said, we're going to go on that same journey. We're going to make the movement of people, ideas, and capital frictionless as a country. Back then, we were struggling with the 2008 recession. We had lost Nortel, our flagship. BlackBerry had gone down, our other flagship. But the country took it on very earnestly to say technology and innovation and that core is what we want to be as a country. And we had a couple of assets that were kind of interesting. In a world where trust is quite low, Canada's brand is trust. And increasingly is the place where trust is built into technology for the world. Flash forward for you, 12 years later, the second largest innovation hub in the world and the fastest growing, let me say that again, the second largest innovation hub in the world and the fastest growing by 350% is Waterloo, Toronto. It sits at 315,000 tech workers to the Bay Area of 370,000 workers. We're adding, as Rana pointed out, 1 million new Canadians every 12 months. That's 10x what the US is admitting in a country 1/10 the size. So that's just the math on the people side. That matters because I'm old enough to remember when Boston was the center of global innovation. And I remember the debate of West Coast versus East Coast offense. What won was the place that welcomed people to go achieve their dreams. That's one of the reasons I came to the Valley in 1999, to go build companies and serve the world. You can't do that anymore, which is one of the reasons I left. But you can do that in Canada. One other key metric is, okay, all the smart people are going there, just like they started to leave Boston in '94. Now that's starting to happen in Canada now. Well, can you serve the world from there? Reasonable question if you're trying to grow a large global business. Canada is the only G7 country that has a free trade agreement with all other G7 countries. From a trade point of view, it is the best place to go build a large global business. And the last question you might have is, well, can I get finance there? Can I get capital there? Venture capital returns in Canada for the first time in history are better than venture capital returns in the US. Venture investment in Canadian companies went from about $1 billion a year to $17 billion, so up 17x. You say, well, those are interesting metrics, but are the companies performing? So the last one I'll leave you, and somewhat ironically, is with the SVB Final State of Global Markets report. Still on the website, you can go look at it. The concluding slide was like for like Canada versus US startups. Canadian startups were growing using 38% less capital. We've always known it was more cost effective to grow companies in Canada for a whole bunch of reasons, like healthcare being provided by the government, things like education being provided by the government. And so the things that you needed to worry about was really just growing your company as opposed to those other issues. The thing that startled me, honestly, in 30 years of data, were the Canadian companies were growing faster than their US peers the last 5 quarters in a row. So you can go check that out, SVB State of Global Markets. And I think the title of the slide was Go North, Go North. So I'm sitting here, Rana, saying, go north. It's a great place to build an awesome company.
So maybe I can dig into that a little bit more and sort of ask you, Chris, so we've all, like you and I, sort of inhabit a world where we recognize the kind of just the real pace of what's been taking place in Canada, and which, if you haven't been in the last 5 years particularly, please make a trip up, and you'll get a sense of the scale now, the critical about the tipping points that have been achieved, all of the just the real grittiness and the sort of pace that's taking place right now. But if you could sort of dig into that and say, well, what do you think that the contributing aspects of that from a policy standpoint have been? Where could young companies really, look to that would really surprise them right now? Just given the policy landscape that we're providing, not just an incentive, but also, other policies that we as a government have been working on. What surprised you as somebody, as an investor, as an entrepreneur yourself?
I think probably the biggest thing you're going to experience if you come, and you should, to Rana's point, come this summer. Collision Conference is going to be in Toronto late June. So that's now the 3rd largest city in North America. Let me say that again. Toronto Waterloo is now the 3rd largest city in North America. So it goes Los Angeles, New York, and then Toronto Waterloo. The interesting thing about Toronto Waterloo that you cannot say about any other city over 4 million people on the planet is 50% of the people that live in that city were not born in that country. Fully 2 million people walking around that city were not born in Canada. One of the things that made this place so special for so long was it wasn't all of the infrastructure and all that sort of stuff. It was, you just had to go from one meeting to another meeting to another meeting, and you met the person from Korea, and then you met the person from Spain, and then you met the person from Germany, and then you met the person from India, and they were all working here. And so you had an information advantage, because it was all flowing through here all the time. Unfortunately, that doesn't work anymore for a combination of reasons. That's happening every day in Canada. You can serve the world from there. We have one company that went from idea to $2.4 billion in revenue, serving 100 countries with people that speak 120 different languages, all in one city. So it's truly global. That's startling. And the global skills immigration policy you talked about, actually, the idea of that was actually birthed in our building, which was founded by founders, for founders 25 years ago. So it's a very pragmatic way of going about things and saying, hey, look, what do we need to do to compete? And a very simple idea is if we can get all the smartest people from all over the world to come together and build stuff here, that's the starting point. So I would say that that's there. There's a bunch of other things we can talk about, like AI as a field was actually started at University of Toronto. AI sounds like a pretty interesting technology to know something about right now. The deepest density of expertise on AI right now that's getting commercialized sits in Toronto, Toronto Waterloo.
Yeah, I'd like to draw out that question of, densities of talent. And, what you sit in Toronto Waterloo. Waterloo, if many of you know, has, been an engineering hub for the better part of 50 years. One of the greatest success stories in terms of Silicon Valley recruiting has been through the Waterloo internship process. And so Silicon Valley is populated by a lot of people who have Waterloo connections. And so it's interesting. What is specific about, say, an ecosystem like Waterloo that makes it interesting right now?
Yeah, I'd say a couple things. So to build on your point, for those that aren't familiar, University of Waterloo produces more engineering and computer science graduates than the entire UC system in California every year. And they're 100%, based on co-op education. Meaning when those students graduate after 5 years, they've done a work term at Twitter, they've done a work term at Google, they've done a work term at Microsoft. And so they come out highly employable, which is why the school was the #1 recruiting school for half of the NASDAQ 100. But that learning, again, what I learned from Ty was make the movement of people, ideas, and capital frictionless. So you imagine 5,000 undergraduate students, computer science and engineering, that are coming back from the Valley every 4 months after working at Google, Microsoft, Twitter, go down the line. And we shouldn't be so surprised that Marcel Cortez, who immigrated from Brazil to Canada, co-founded FAIR, which just crossed $1 billion in revenue, based in Waterloo. We shouldn't be surprised that Martin Bashiri, who immigrated to Canada from Iran, his company, Applyboard, just crossed $2.4 billion. We shouldn't be surprised that Magnet Forensics just got acquired for $1.8 billion. We shouldn't be surprised, no. We should be surprised? No, we shouldn't be surprised. He's going to let me keep going. That OpenText is now the 7th largest software company on the planet based in Waterloo. So to your point, there's a density, but there's also a vector of momentum that I think is super exciting.
And I think that, in fairness, it's this kind of intensity that we're seeing is also across Canada. Vancouver was the highest rate of growth of tech jobs of any city in North America last year. And, for a variety of reasons, and Chris alludes to them, and it's the combination of policy, pre-existing infrastructure from healthcare to education to the quality of the physical infrastructure to the diversity of people and talent that you have in that ecosystem. So each of these are decisions by companies in conjunction with our governments, and we have governments representatives here from the province of Ontario, for instance, and other provinces as well. And by the way, in this room, we also have a number of immigration experts. We have representatives here from our Department of Immigration.
Wave your hands.
Please go and
Come
see
to Canada,
them.
those are the people.
We have also service providers who are in this space. So raise your hands that are in the service provision space to bring people to Canada. So this is a intense room itself. But the other thing I would say that in terms of and maybe I'd ask Chris where we're going on this is that say something more about the exciting growth in the tech ecosystem in Canada particularly. We had some holes in the past in terms of growth stage capital, and now we're sort of moving up the chain in terms of the ecosystem in tech particularly right now. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, just to kind of repeat, because it still blows me away when I say it out loud. Venture capital returns in Canada are better than the United States for the first time in history. Second largest innovation hub on the planet, now 313,000 workers, in the Ontario sector. You look through that and you're seeing not just lots of people coming, lots of capital coming after really smart people, but you're now seeing this critical mass of high-performing companies like we've never seen before.
All right, I think this is now the part of the proceedings where we get to introduce our special guest to animate this conversation even further.
So I would like to introduce Suri Chawla, the Global Head of Services for Tech Mahindra. He's a serial entrepreneur with over 3 decades in IT, which includes experience in building successful businesses for his own ventures, but also for other companies. The one thing that many of you all know about Suri is, Suri always says that he is known as Gurdeep's husband. And for those of you who don't know who Gurdeep is the official interpreter for American presidents in the US and I believe Canada too, right? So, Suri, welcome.
Thanks so much. Grab a seat. So the reason why I think it was really exciting to have Suri join us for this is that, not only, he grew up in as a result of the fact that his father was in the Indian Foreign Service, he grew up in Canada, but went back to India, but came back to Canada, and has been a serial entrepreneur and has had the experience of building tech companies across borders. And there's an additional interest that I had, in this conversation was that Suri is building a company that is also does principal business in Mexico, which, as many of you know, we've put a lot of time, I was involved with our NAFTA council and the negotiations for NAFTA. But this new sort of ecosystem of between places like India, Mexico, Canada, the United States is a real conveyor belt of opportunity. But I wonder, Suri, if you could just tell your story a little bit and your journey to this place and maybe say something about what you're building in Mexico.
Thank you, Rana. Thank you, Chelsea, for introducing me to Canada almost 7 years ago. Of course, Pawan is here as well. Nice meeting you. First of all, thank you for the honor. My background quickly, I of course grew up in Delhi. I was part of the whole partition. Parents were born in a refugee colony, literally, and got a break. So my dad got into foreign service, risen up on the ranks, and Canada happened to be one of the countries when he was posted when I was kind of about to enter college. So I was privileged to be in Ottawa from 79 to 83. I did last year of my high school. It was like grade 13, and I went to Ottawa U next over the canal for my computer science. I had no clue what computer science even spread like. I was kind of in India studying from a medical, and in 1980 there was a talk about, hey, computer science, and I saw the opportunity, grabbed it. Here I am. I went back to India in 83, came back to US in 1996. I started my first company here in 2001. That time, I had two other partners who were Americans. At that time, I did choose Mexico, as Rana said. That experiment nearshore really worked out well. When I was trying to do my second one in 2015, I really wanted to go back. There was this little kind of voice in my head that said, Suri, you've not been to Canada. Canada is a great nearshore country. And I took the plunge, I think 2 years later, 2018. And I think thanks to Chelsea and Pawan who introduced me to the wonderful work. And it was pretty nostalgic for me to land in Ottawa Airport after 30 years. I remember FaceTiming my sister back in Delhi. She had never been to Canada after. We went to Lisgar as well. And I went back and said, hey, look around. I said, yeah, that place is still there. Yeah, that Lord Elgin is still there. But that restaurant is gone, right? So it was pretty nostalgic. I could show her the apartment that I lived in. I think coming back, I think it's been a wonderful experience. I remember when I met Chelsea and the team in Ontario saying, hey, we're going to grow to 50, 100 people at the time. Everybody said, you really sure? He said, that's the goal. And I think we went from 50 to 100 pretty quickly. Within 2 years, 100 plus people in Canada, all high-end engineers and architects, well paid. And I think it's a great experience. I'm happy to answer any question, but that in a nutshell is my story. And I'm not very used to it. My wife is the one typically sits on this forum, so it feels weird for me to sit here. But thank you for the honor. And
it's a terrific story as well in terms of how you came to it through, sort of working with the government of Ontario. So we have Chelsea Pete here, who's the representative of the government of Ontario who's done that work. And so Chelsea, thanks for that. She'll be speaking on Friday as well, so come to that session. And you also work with service providers. You have Pavan Dillon here, who I think you work with through that. But, and finding your way into, or back to, in your case, the Canadian ecosystem. What surprised you about what you're seeing in Canada right now?
I think when we started the company, I think, like I said, Mexico was known to me because I knew there was a good price leverage. I think Canada, what really surprised me was, of course, diversity was not kind of surprised. I think the kind of diversity is always there. The feeling of welcome, easy to do business, right? It's not as different from what is in US, right? To start to grow. There's a lot of incentives, there's a lot of welcome. I think the thing that surprised me, I remember Chelsea sent me past one of the events in Toronto, and she had set up on a half-a-day session in one of the government offices. And here I was sitting in a room where one after the other, the government officials came and pitched, hey, here are the tax advantages of being in Canada, right? If you want to work here, here are the incentives you can do. If you want to do accounting, here are the firms that I recommend, right? Almost 6 or 7, if you want to do business, here's a representative for Waterloo, the representative from different business units, trying to pitch to you, sitting down. And I felt really bad. Here's a government law, typically you have to run after government for permits. Here's governments coming, pitching back to you, why you need to kind of set up a base. I think that was a really wonderful experience for me. Of course, finding talent was easy. To me, one of the things a lot of people say Mexico has its advantages, engineering. I think if you look at cultural proximity to the US, the language, the way they speak, again, Canada, you cannot get any closer to US. So I think they filled a really good void for me. Anybody who's very client-facing knows the culture. The other advantage was, I remember a lot of people talk about this TN visa, because we talk about H1 being a big challenge. Because of the old NAFTA treaty, there's a TN visa which covers Canada, Mexico, and US. Of course, the Mexicans can come on a TN visa too, but there's typically a consulate appointment which takes about a week, 2 weeks to get. But Canadians on a TN visa, if you want to sponsor a Canadian to come here, they can literally catch a flight, get TN visa stamped on the way to US. So it's just a simple interview, come in. Those are the few things I can talk about, but I'm happy to answer any questions now.
Fantastic, and I know that we're a bit pressed in time for this session, just given the compression. But Chris, I wonder if you wanted to give us some parting thoughts. And I know that the H-1B issue and the opportunity in Canada is something we really want to highlight at the moment.
Yeah, I was in DC yesterday, and the numbers are moving around a little bit, but basically the number of applicants on H-1B, so known good candidate, known good company, were 300,000 last year. Only 100, little less than 100,000 were accepted. This year, we're already through the entire process, and it was well over 500,000 and only 80. So Canada has this opportunity to basically say, look, just bring those people, literally bring them in weeks, and have them situated in Canada. To your point, TN visa, they can serve the US side, and I know Ron wanted to make sure I didn't just talk Ontario at the time. It's easy for me to do as a Kingston kid, but I'll give you one other story. When I was in Washington, D.C. last week, I was talking to one of the leaders of Garmin. They have 100 people in Calgary, same story. They were able to build that team, recruit globally, bring them into Canada, have the team there, and in place in months. When I was in Israel a month ago, they said they used to have all of their second headquarters in the United States in the Valley. No longer. I was meeting with Gil Schwed, CEO, chairman, founder of Checkpoint, known as the sort of Bill Gates of Israel. They have 450 employees in Canada, Checkpoint, the only place where they have employees outside, and because they can serve the world from Canada. And so I would just say, you can find your people, you can find your religion, you can find your food, you can feel safe, and you can build a really awesome business you can feel amazing about, and build big, awesome things for humanity out of Canada. And it's a pretty fun place to come. Coolest place in the world. So I'll leave you with that.
That's fantastic. And listen, I just in conclusion for this session, first of all, let me thank these two individuals who, I think really brought it in terms of the story that we're really trying to present to you. But what I would say to all of you and all of the organizations that you represent, whether it's, if you're talking to people who are top talent out there, there's one place to be coming right now, just given the sheer intensity of all of the other forces that we're seeing in the world right now, and that is Canada. Just given the challenges that we're seeing in other jurisdictions, please have Canada on the top of your agenda. And if you're an organization or if you're an investor, please use Canada as the next platform. Because countries are platforms too, and it takes a long time to put the infrastructure, the policy alignment, to have critical mass to really build that. And those country platforms are going to become increasingly important going forward in the years ahead. And so I would really encourage you to look at Canada. So that I think concludes our session here. And thank you so much for all of you who've attended and all of you who are tuning in digitally. Thanks.